Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Israel.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. A new political memoir takes aim at the White House. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates writes about his years serving the Bush and Obama administrations. He doesn't spare anyone, including President Obama, Vice President Biden, and Hillary Rodham Clinton. He was a key player in some of President Obama's most important national security decisions. But in his new, soon-to-be-published book, Duty, Memoirs of a Secretary at War, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates has some harsh words for his commander-in-chief. Gates writes of everything from the war in Iraq to the death of Osama bin Laden and the escalation of the war in Afghanistan, criticizing Obama's leadership style and his commitment to the mission of his troops. Recalling a 2011 meeting on the Afghan war, Gates writes he realized the president doesn't trust his commander, can't stand Afghan President Hamid Karzai, doesn't believe in his own strategy, and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out. Gates also recounts a conversation he heard between the president and then Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. They were talking about their public statements criticizing President Bush's decision to send more troops into Iraq. According to Gates, Hillary told the president her opposition to the surge in Iraq had been political because she was facing him in the Iowa primary. President Obama conceded vaguely that opposition to the Iraq surge had been political. Gates says that hearing those admissions was both surprising and dismaying. The memoir is not all criticism, however. Gates calls President Obama a man of personal integrity, and he says the decision to go after Osama bin Laden was, quote, one of the most courageous decisions I had ever witnessed in the White House. Gates calls Vice President Joe Biden a man of integrity as well, but he also saved some of his harshest criticisms for the president's second-in-command, writing, quote, I think he has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. The president disagrees, calling Biden, quote, one of the leading statesmen of his time. But the book certainly won't help the president politically, especially coming at a time when his poll numbers have already fallen to historic lows. The White House issued a statement defending the vice president, calling him one of the leading statesmen of his time who has helped to advance America's leadership in the world. Gates' memoir goes on sale January 14th.
The polar vortex has been far from kind to the U.S., turning most of the nation into an ice locker.
It hurts. It hurts. Freezing. Can't feel my face.
Numb. And I'm pregnant, so we're both numb.
Freezing air, blizzards, whipping winds, frozen roadways causing extremely dangerous driving conditions and leaving thousands of people stranded all over the country. More than 7,000 flights were canceled in the last 2 days. 3 Amtrak trains were stuck in snow, leaving more than 500 passengers stranded outside of Chicago for nearly 14 hours. Temperatures are expected to rise by the end of the week, but officials are still urging people to stay indoors.
The White House is marking the 50th anniversary of President Lyndon B. Johnson's war on poverty. But one Republican leader says it is time to rethink the country's failed programs. Senator Marco Rubio will deliver a speech on Capitol Hill today, and he'll outline an aggressive agenda in the coming weeks.
After 50 years, isn't it time to declare big government's war on poverty a failure? Instead of continuing to borrow and spend trillions of dollars on government programs that don't work, what our nation needs is a real agenda that helps people acquire the skills they need to lift themselves out of poverty and to pursue the American dream. This agenda would create an economy with more good-paying middle-class jobs and a government with less debt.
The White House says poverty has dropped from nearly 26% to 16% in the last 45 years, and it credits those government programs for the progress.
Republicans joined Democrats in the U.S. Senate today to advance debate on an unemployment benefits bill. President Obama praised the move, saying it's an important first step. Gary Lane has more.
President Obama was pleased with the bipartisan vote to advance his first order of business for 2014. At the White House Tuesday afternoon, he said an extension is needed because a lot of Americans are still struggling from the effects of the recession.
Unemployment insurance has been a vital economic lifeline. For a lot of people, it's the only source of income they've got to support their families while they look for a new job. These aren't folks who are just sitting back, waiting for things to happen. They're out there actively looking for work. They desperately want work.
The unemployment benefits extension expired 3 days after Christmas. President Obama and the Democrats would like to see it extended another 3 months at a cost of $6.4 billion. The bill restores up to 47 weeks of unemployment benefits, an average of $256 weekly to more than 1 million Americans. But conservatives argue the nation can ill afford more debt or the creation of a new costly entitlement program. Republicans like Kentucky Senator Rand Paul say they'll support the unemployment benefits extension only if Congress finds a way to pay for it. Paul said he thinks it's wrong to borrow money from China or to simply print up money for it. Regardless, the president insists Congress needs to respond quickly.
Congress should pass this bipartisan plan right away, and I will sign it right away. And more than 1 million Americans across the country will feel a little hope right away.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
The family of a missionary imprisoned in North Korea says former NBA star Dennis Rodman is out of bounds for refusing to help secure his release. Rodman is in the communist country for a basketball exhibition honoring dictator Kim Jong-un. Rodman describes Un as a beloved friend. The family of jailed American Kenneth Bae hoped Rodman would help secure his release from a North Korean prison. Bae, a Christian tour guide, is serving 15 years of hard labor on charges he intended to topple the government. His family says he is suffering from diabetes and an enlarged heart, and he should be released. In a television interview, Rodman became irate when he was asked if he planned to help get Un, talk to Un about the missionary.
I'm not trying to save the world. I'm not trying to save Kenneth Bae, all these people. That's not my job.
Disappointed is an understatement. We were shocked and outraged. Could not believe he was saying these things. He was in a position to help. He didn't want to.
The State Department says the U.S. remains very committed to securing Bae's release.
North Korea remains the world's top persecutor of Christians. That assessment comes in the new World Watch list from Open Doors International. It is the 12th year the Korean regime has held that infamous position. Christians also came under intensified persecution in failed countries in 2013. States like Somalia, Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, and Central African Republic saw a troubling spike in anti-Christian activity. Open Doors states that Islamic extremism is the main source of persecution of Christians in 36 of the top 50 countries.
Another Christian has been thrown in prison in Iran. Moabit News reports a Christian convert named Hossein Saketi has been sentenced to a year behind bars. Saketi was arrested last July and then transferred to several prisons and courts. At one point, he was held in solitary confinement for 15 days. During his trial, he was charged with Christian evangelism. Over the past 3 years, Iran has ramped up its persecution of Christians, shutting down churches and throwing dozens of Iranian Christians in jail for their faith.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is pushing Middle East peace, but behind the scenes, Palestinian leaders are spreading a different message to their own people. Chris Mitchell has this shocking report.
A report just released by the Israeli government exposes consistent examples of the Palestinian Authority urging its citizens to abandon peace in favor of hate. For example, this video shows Palestinian children shouting, "Lift your hand, raise your voice, this Zionist must die."
The main messages of this incitement on daily basis that is projected and transmitted on daily basis is that sooner or later Israel should be eliminated.
The annual Palestinian Incitement Index showed that while the Palestinian Authority says one thing in English to a Western audience, it communicates an entirely different message to their own people in Arabic. These messages contain four main themes. Israel has no right to exist. Its disappearance is unavoidable and should be expected soon. Jews are subhuman creatures and must be dealt with accordingly. All forms of struggle, including terrorism, are legitimate in order to realize their final goal. One example features this young Palestinian girl. She sings, "O you who murdered Allah's pious prophets, O you who were brought up on spilling blood, you have condemned to humiliation and hardship. O sons of Zion, O most evil among creations, O barbaric monkeys, wretched pigs. This song shows children singing, when they die as martyrs, they'll go to heaven. On Mahmoud Abbas's webpage it says, Jesus was a Palestinian who was crucified by the Jews, and called Jesus a Palestinian messenger. The official PA school Facebook page quotes Hitler. All these examples have one thing in common. They're directed toward young Palestinians.
And as a matter of fact, a Palestinian child, from the day he was born until the day his mind is already shaped, is going through this brainwashing, this hate indoctrination, this genocide indoctrination, day in, day out. There's no way out of it because there's no other thing. It's not competing with other messages. These are the only messages he gets.
Ironically, Palestinian incitement increased during the latest round of peace negotiations by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, it may be the ultimate irony. A ship full of scientists sent to the Arctic to find melting ice. Instead, they get stuck in expanding ice. See how nature is making a mockery of global warming when we come back. Volcanoes could be a greater threat to civilization than had been thought in past years, and one of those volcanoes is right here in the United States. The largest megavolcano in the world is located in Yellowstone, measuring 53 miles wide, and it's produced 3 of the world's most monstrous eruptions. As CBN News has reported, if it should erupt today, anyone within dozens of miles would be annihilated. Ash clouds would spread across the U.S. and it would block sunlight and push temperatures down by 9 to 15 degrees for years. The Geological Society of London reports such events could result in the ruin of the world agriculture, severe disruption of food supplies, and mass starvation. It could lead to as much as 1 billion casualties.
Well, for decades, the prophets of climate change have warned us that global warming is threatening life on Earth. There's just one problem. The Earth isn't getting warmer.
No, in fact, the sun is showing signs that we're headed for something very different, global cooling. Dale Hurd has this story from Copenhagen.
Oops, this wasn't supposed to happen. A ship sent to the Antarctic to look for signs of global warming got stuck in frozen ice from fearsome cold. Then the rescue ship got stuck in the ice too. It's kind of like the climate change movement itself, stuck in denial over the fact that the climate is not getting warmer and seems to be getting much colder. The climate is changing, but it's not changing the way the climate change crowd told us it would change. Nature has made a mockery of global warming. So who are the real climate deniers? The ice is not only growing in the South Pole, but in the North Pole. And the coldest Arctic temperatures in decades have descended upon North America. But this inconvenient truth didn't stop Greenpeace from trying to scare children last month with a video of a sweaty, beleaguered Santa Claus threatening to call off Christmas because the North Pole is melting.
Dear children, regrettably, I bring bad tidings. Melting ice here. The North Pole has made our operations intolerable and impossible. And there may be no alternative but to cancel Christmas.
Cheer up, Santa. Arctic ice is growing, but that may not be the good news that it seems to be, because there are signs the Earth could be entering a very unpleasant cooling period. Sunspot activity remains very low.
The sun has been very unusual for almost 15 years now.
Senior scientist Jens Petersen at Denmark's Technical University says the sun recently reached solar maximum, and there should be a lot of sunspot activity. But there isn't.
There would normally have been maybe 2 or 3 times as many sunspots as we have seen this year. We have to go back more than 100 years to find a similar solar maximum which has been so weak as the one we are in right now.
The last time the sun was this quiet, from the 1600s to the 1800s, North America and Europe suffered through a weather event known as Little Ice Age. when the Thames River in London regularly froze solid and colonial America saw terrible winters. Crops failed and people starved. Peterson says climate scientists know the Earth stopped warming 15 years ago. But the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, of which Peterson is a member, suppressed a recent finding by its own scientists that the UN's climate model has been proven wrong.
And then they change also part of what the scientists have written. And in particular, one of the issues has been why global warming has stopped during the last 15 years. And the scientists were very frank about that this is a problem, that climate models do not match with the climate we observe.
Politicians removed that important piece of good news from the final draft. It's as if the imminent danger from climate change can't be wrong, because it's now too important. It's become a political movement, a cash cow for climate scientists and environmental groups, and some say a way for world leaders to control economics and people.
This is absolutely a political agenda.
Dan Gaynor of the Media Research Center.
When you look at what the government will be able to do with climate change, it gives them entree into literally every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I call it climatism.
Steve Gorham is the author of The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism.
It has become a path for global change across the world for adopting green economies and electric cars and putting wind turbines everywhere and changing light bulbs.
And it doesn't matter how badly the climate change prophets of doom get it wrong. Al Gore said all the ice in the Arctic would be melted by now. It's growing. Others predicted a shrinking food supply and flooded coastlines. Hurricane Sandy and Typhoon Haiyan are said to be because of climate change. But that ignores the fact that the worst tropical cyclones in modern times occurred in the 1960s. The climate change agenda is going forward anyway. The world is already spending at least $250 billion a year on it. Environmentalists want more. Activists are demanding what they call climate justice from developed nations.
What they really want to do is dump trillions into it. They want to get somewhere between 1% and 3% of global GDP. I mean, the amount's staggering amount of money.
Climate change skeptics have been censored and compared to Holocaust deniers and even child molesters. But forgotten in the effort to save the world from warming is the effect on the world's poor. Gorham says more than 1 billion people do not have access to electricity, and almost as many struggle with unreliable power. Cheap electricity from coal would be a savior for the world's poor, but the world's wealthy nations don't want them to have it. All in the name of saving the planet from a crisis that mounting evidence suggests is non-existent. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Copenhagen.
Up next, shining a light in the heart of darkness, how Christians have joined the fight in one of the hubs of human trafficking right here in America. Authorities in New Jersey are stepping up their efforts against sex trafficking ahead of next month's Super Bowl. Hundreds of thousands of fans are expected in East Rutherford, New Jersey for the February 2nd game. State officials are training law enforcement, hospitality workers, airport employees, and others. The program will help them identify signs of sex trafficking. Local churches are also working to bring awareness on the issue.
When it comes to human trafficking, Houston tops an ugly list. The Justice Department says the Texas city is one of the country's largest hubs, and the problem is simply too big for police to tackle alone. So Christian organizations are helping to shine a light on the problem and to give shelter to victims.
A night drive on the streets of Houston shines a bright light on a big problem.
Ship Channel area is a huge hotspot. The Galleria area, just south of the actual Galleria, is probably the epicenter for human trafficking.
Adam Cheney works with Elijah Rising. The ministry has rescued at least a dozen victims and directs bus tours to show Houston area residents the hot spots for sex trafficking. It's identified 300 suspected locations.
The I-10 corridor here has been labeled as probably the #1 human trafficking corridor in the nation.
Some hotspots look like spas, but are actually brothels, selling enslaved girls for sex.
I wouldn't say the living condition of a dog because you do take your dog out once or twice a day.
Ohad Shahul is a former human trafficking bodyguard.
They get sold 10 times a day on a good day. On a bad day, they'll be sold like 20 or 30 times a day.
Victims include women smuggled from Southeast Asia, South America, and Mexico. But that's not all. There are an estimated 6,000 children on the streets of Houston on any given night, all runaways. That number has helped the city to earn the unwanted distinction of being one of the most intense areas in the country for child sex trafficking.
It's an alarming problem. I mean, I think that for me as a social worker who has been doing this for years and years and years, I was totally unaware that our city was a hub of trafficking.
Kelly Armstrong is with Arrow Child and Family Ministries. The organization started Freedom Place. This is a safe house for girls rescued from human trafficking. And volunteers from Houston area churches united to refurbish and furnish every inch of it.
I mean, it's just ask and it will be given, and given abundantly. And that's what we have experienced. I mean, everything in this home has really been donated.
Armstrong calls this farm and its services a place for girls to hide, heal, and find hope for their future. In 10 years, the U.S. Attorney's Office says 500 human trafficking victims have been rescued in Houston alone. The average age when the girls are forced into prostitution is 13, and their expectancy is 7 years. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Finally today, CBN recently blessed 300 underprivileged children in India.
The day-long Christmas event was called Light of Education Literacy Program, and it was sponsored by CBN's Orphans Promise. Children showed off their talents through skits, musical performances, and memorization of Bible verses. A local pastor shared a Christmas message, and children were served lunch. And each child received a special gift.
Beautiful.
At work around the world.
I love it. Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today.
Make it a wonderful Wednesday, everybody.